So, what's up everyone? Thank you so much for tuning in. We are back with another video. Unfortunately, Van couldn't join us today. She's actually not feeling well. Today is an amazing day because we are joined by my good buddy here, Chris. We've been friends for
about 7-8 years.
7 to 8 years
We've known
now.
each other since college, right?
Yeah.
Like 27, no, not 27, 2014, 2015.
Yeah, so long time, long time.
Yeah.
And yeah, so we keep in touch. Last time we met was in Manila last November.
Yeah, last time was in Manila. You were in my part of town for my birthday, actually.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was a good time to meet up. And then I think before that we saw each other, I think about like 4 months ago. The last time I was here.
That's right, here in Darwin.
Exactly, just over there.
Yeah.
Then now I'm just in town again. So since I'm here unexpectedly, actually,
Yep.
we decided to meet up.
Yeah, so thank you so much, and thank you for doing this.
Dude,
Honestly.
honestly, my honor, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. So, yeah, guys, Chris here had a very interesting life, actually, and he's here to share his story. He is actually pure Filipino,
Yeah.
but yeah, he was born in a different country, and he was also raised in. So he grew up in like different
Other countries.
So yeah, he's here to share his story. So yeah.
Yeah. I think like we had like a few conversations about this before, right? Because like for you were born here, you were raised here, but then like you're half French, but then you're growing up in the Philippine environment. But then for me, I was born into a Filipino family, but I was born in Europe. I was born in Vienna. But then after Vienna, we did move back to the Philippines for a while. But then like before I even really had, consciousness to have like, solid memories, I was already growing up in the US. I was like growing up in New Jersey. I was there for a couple of years. Then my family and I moved to Brussels in Belgium, back to Europe. After Brussels, we went back to the Philippines for just a short while. Then I went to Singapore and then to Berlin, then back to Vienna. And then actually after that, that's when I came back here to Dumaguete for the first time. Never been outside of Manila in my life until then. Studied here for college, and then most recently I was back in Vienna again for about like 2 years, just during the pandemic, and now I'm just back in the Philippines again.
That's incredible. So that's around like 4, 5 countries that you.
6 countries in total, like 6 different countries that I lived in, and then like the number of countries I visited is like, I don't know, like 15 to 20.
Okay.
Because sometimes we'll just visit like the neighboring countries, like we're already there, might as well, right?
Yeah, so that's incredible. But as you said, the earliest memory you have was in America, right? In
Yeah.
the US. So how was it like?
It was definitely very interesting because growing up in the US, I felt very much more American in my upbringing. I had like more American syntax or like slang in the way I talked. The way I thought was a bit more Western compared to our more conservative, like Asian, like belief system, that sort of thing. But at the same time, because I was purely Asian, I was still considered, oh, he's the Asian kid when I'm in the US or when I was in Europe, because I'm clearly look different from everyone else. Of course, it doesn't help that I'm like a foot shorter than everyone else.
Yeah.
It's hilarious because like when I'm here in the Philippines, as far as Filipino standards go, I'm not tall, but I'm definitely on the taller side of, the height of Filipinos. But I go to Europe and I'm like definitely on the shorter end of this. And I was telling this story to someone the other day where the most embarrassing moment I probably had when I realized that I'm a short Asian boy is when a friend of mine, even taller than you actually, he asked me to get this plate from the kitchen, and on the top shelf, I go up for it, I try to reach for it, right? And I realized I couldn't even reach the shelf. And I had to like go on top of the kitchen counter and stand on top of the counter to get it. I'm like, wow, I am short. But I mean, yeah, because like, that's kind of part of the whole experience, because there's parts of me that kind of feels like it belongs there, right? Because I grew up there. There's parts of there that I kind of vibe with. But then there are definitely some parts where I connect with in the Philippines, because I still grew up in a very Filipino household because, my mom and my sister. And at least as far as growing up was concerned, it was very much, you don't necessarily fit anywhere. And for like the people who go through a similar experience that I do, where we're just always moved around all the time, we have this sense of we can fit, we can adapt anywhere, but we don't fit in anywhere because, you know, I'm partially Filipino, but I'm not all Filipino. I'm partially European, but I'm not all European. Partially American, but I'm not all American. And I guess, you know, for those of us who especially were going through that in our teen years, that was such a big struggle to think of. But at least for me, where my stance on this now, as you know, someone who's like pushing 30, almost, is that I understand the need to fit in somewhere especially when you're growing up, especially in your teen years, right? Because you just want a sense of belonging, you want a sense of community. And then now as an adult, or like, you know, reaching into adulthood, I'm like, you know, it doesn't matter if you fit in. You can have a sense of belonging here, and that's okay. It doesn't matter if you completely agree with everything that happens there, or you completely fit into everything there. The point is, you are you, and you're like this combination of like these multiple experiences that you had, and that's what makes you beautiful, that's what makes you unique. And you don't have to try to fit yourself into any particular mold. And you know, there are moments where I feel like I want to be very Filipino, so you know, maybe I'll decide to have adobo that day. But then like I could be sitting in my apartment in Manila and I'm like, I'm really craving some European cuisine. Then I'll cook some pasta today. Maybe get some wine, get some beers for that. And you know, embrace every aspect of who you are from your experience, and don't let anyone, you know, like shame you or embarrass you for having like that different personality. So for me, like my journey of like moving around, I absolutely love culture. I like love meeting people and just, you know, understanding their belief system, understanding the way they live, understanding what's normal to them. And then there'll be moments where I kind of adopt that into my own life. And I love how it made me who I am. Like, for example, like the German punctuality, that was something that I ended up like adopting into, where I'm like, you say like 1 o'clock, we're meeting, like, all right, 1 o'clock, I am there, like walking into the door.
Yes, and that's very true, guys, because we actually, we were messaging each other back and forth.
Yeah.
And I told Chris here, okay, tomorrow we're meeting at 1. Long and behold, exactly 1 o'clock, he was there at the entrance, and I was like, wow, okay, perfect.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's the great thing about living in a multicultural environment, right? I mean, I probably know you probably experienced this yourself in your own household, where you have your dad's side and you have your mom's side. There are great things on both sides of the culture, and you kind of want to like live up to that. And for me, like one of the things that I appreciated from my time in the US is my sense of being very vocal. Because like when you know, like especially back in the US, like people there are very much more open-minded. The freedom of speech.
Yes.
I'm gonna speak my mind. And I felt like that was very helpful for me, at least surviving in the Philippines, where sometimes, you know, as kids, we feel a little bit more timid or shy, right? To voice out our opinions to our family or to our parents or to our friends. And we end up just kind of like accepting, I don't know, for some people it can go as far as really hurt feelings, or being put in a situation that they're not uncomfortable with, right? Or just a bit of inconvenience. But for me, because I still had like that American personality from growing up, my parents told me, or my family told me at least, like, you were very vocal as a kid. And it is funny seeing this in my nephew. He's also living overseas now with my sister. They're all living in Europe. He came back into the Philippines, where we don't mind him, you know, we don't mind him being vocal. You know, we encourage it, like, speak your mind. But you also know like the sense of time and place.
Yeah, okay.
Like, again, you know, no judgment on the child. He was very much like, what was he, like 5 years old? But in a very public manner, he started saying something that was very controversial. We were like, maybe not right here, right now.
Yeah.
We'll explain it to you in the car. just like thank you for saying that, but we'll explain it to you in a more appropriate setting.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I don't know, like, for me, like, that's something that I absolutely enjoyed. And I guess to touch on this really quick, like, I spent a lot of time growing up overseas, right? For most of my life, at least until college, I spent my entire life abroad. And that was weird for me. And, you know, just to give you a little bit of context, the reason why we were moving around was because my family were diplomats. So my family works with the embassy, And part of the thing that they told us, being a member of a diplomatic family, was you represent your country. When we go anywhere, we're supposed to be the example of what a Filipino is and the example of what the Filipino has to offer. I made the argument, being the vocal person I am, I was like, that's kind of dumb because I have never lived in the Philippines for that long. And I was starting to question the ability of like, how can I represent my country when I don't even know my country?
Okay.
And then it got to a point where I was like, my mother raised me in a Filipino household, and I still had this love and affection for the Philippines. But as far as my own experience with the Philippines goes, it was always just someone else's secondhand experience that they shared with me, and I never really had my own experience. So when the time for me to choose where to go to college, it caused a bit of a stir in some people, especially in my high school in Berlin, where I was lined up to study in a few like really good universities in Europe, and then I said, I'm going to turn it down, and I'm going to apply to this university in the province in my country. And then it was like, yeah, that's where we met. That was Silliman University.
Silliman.
And then everyone was asking me, why would you give up a European college education for the Philippines? And then the second part of it, why would you choose Dumaguete over Manila? Because I think locally, everyone was like, oh, you're going back to Dumaguete. Oh, do you have family there?
Yeah.
Do you have relatives there? And I was like, no, just me.
Yeah.
And I was like, some of the questions from my family here, but like, aren't you scared? Aren't you afraid? You don't know the language. You don't know anyone there. And I'm like, oh, so basically the same thing that I experienced with every other country I moved into, where I don't know anyone and I don't speak the language. So I guess it's fine for me. And then like for high school professors in Berlin and my family, like, why would you choose to study in the Philippines and not study in Europe? And I was like, at the time I was very much already late, because all the traveling around, every time I moved to a different country, I get pulled back one grade. So I was like very late coming to college. I was already like 21. And I told my family, I'm a Filipino, pure-blooded, but I don't know my own country, I don't know my own culture that well. So I want to take this period of my life to actually get to know my home country. And then I told that to my university professors, and they're very understanding. Well, the funny thing is, one of their questions to me was, give us an argument on what does your university, Silliman, what does it have that these universities don't? And like most European universities, right? They're in the middle of the city. And I told them, well, Silliman, on one side is the beach, on the other side is the mountains. And they were like, oh, well, we can't compete with that.
Yeah, but that's true. That's true. That's what makes Silliman actually unique.
Yeah.
And not just compared to Europe or in the US, but also in the Philippines.
Exactly.
It's,
Exactly. And for me, because like the other thing that drew me to Silliman was just the environment, right? The environment in Silliman, or even in Dumaguete as a whole, it's still Filipino, but there's still touches of foreign cultures spread across the entire city. And I was like I shared my experience, I'm still Filipino, but I'm such a mix of different cultures. I was like, this is definitely the city for me to be in.
Yeah.
Because like my family, most of them are alumnus of Manila universities. The other aspect of it was practicality. Different countries means different schools, which means my record of transcripts was also in different languages. I showed it to universities in Manila as well as other schools, and they were like, we cannot make sense of this. I showed it to Silliman, and they were like, yeah, we totally understand this. Yeah, come on. We're like, okay, awesome, sweet.
But would you say there's actually like some universities in Manila or maybe in Cebu that is just as multicultural as Silliman?
Oh,
Because
definitely so.
I feel like Silliman can't be the only one, right?
Oh yeah, no, definitely it's low. I mean, like, I both were members of like the international org in Silliman, right? And from there, we also met colleagues who were from other universities, but were also international students. I mean, I can't name all of them off the top of my head, but I do know there was like a collection of like 20, 30 other universities. Some of them might not be like, publicly or like well-known universities or like big name universities, but they also had a pretty strong international community. Okay. The one that I do remember clearly was UST in Manila.
Oh, okay.
They actually also have a pretty a solid international community. And actually, while I'm there, every now and then we do meet up with them because like we tell them, oh yeah, we're from the Siliman, they're from UST. So now sometimes we just have dinner together, we have a night out together, and just share about what it's like being a foreigner but not a foreigner living in the Philippines, and of course, just surviving Manila.
Yeah, pretty much. Manila is a very hectic city, and yeah, that's actually very interesting. That type of perspective,
Yeah.
So basically, you're embracing all the culture that you've been growing up. It's not just one side, but then I'm happy to hear that you actually risked everything. Well, I don't think risk is the proper term, but you actually came here by yourself to Dumaguete, learn the language. Now you can speak Cebuano, right?
Yeah, kapag mas kabalugani ko mo Cebuano kaysa mo ingon og Tagalog ba. Basta yun ra lagi.
See, because I remember the first time we met, you spoke Cebuano, but it wasn't that fluent, right?
Oh no, I mean like we met my actual freshman year.
Yeah.
And I was just still picking out like words, and it was like, it would be like hey, how are you feeling? And I'm like, kapoy.
Yeah, like word for word.
Like we just like words, like tiny words I can use in a sentence mixed with English. But now at least I can like have a decent conversation in Cebuano, Bisaya.
So yeah, so there we go. Now you can speak Cebuano because you lived here.
Yeah.
Obviously, your mother tongue is
English, actually.
English, okay.
Which was to my sister's fear. I remember this clearly at home. We were in our house in New Jersey, and then we were probably living there already for about, I would say maybe 5 to 6 months. When we first moved to the US, I was just 6 years old, so obviously I can already speak. But coming from Manila, I did speak a bit of Tagalog already. But then apparently after 6 months of living in the US, my sisters tried to talk to me in Filipino, or Tagalog. And then apparently I just wasn't responding at all. And then I remember her clearly going, "Ma, si Chris, di na siya marunong mag-Tagalog."
Yeah, but it's understandable because again, in your household, I suppose, did your mom speak in Filipino or it was more English dominant?
I mean, it was very much mixed. Because it was like very much like mixed English Tagalog.
Okay.
Because English obviously because we need to get used to speaking to because we were living in the US now, so we had to get used to like living there, right? But then my mom did make an effort to make sure that we did have a balance of Filipino and English at the home. If you ask my mom about this, what she would say was, if I don't speak Tagalog, I don't have baon for the next day.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's a good way to...
incentivize the language learning.
Yeah. Okay, wow. So aside from that, I suppose you can speak like, although not fluent, but those countries that you lived in, also while you were hopping from country to country, you picked up on some of the...
Yeah, I mean, I lived in Belgium for a couple of years, so I do speak French. Like basic French, and then I do speak German, but again like basic, like just conversational German. And it's very weird to see where my language skill is on those two, because when I was learning French, I learned it because I was living there, and at that time I was around like 9 or 10 years old. So my French vocabulary is very basic, very much what you would expect from a 10-year-old. But it's very enough to say, oh, I'm hungry, I need to go here, I want to go there, I want to do this. But if I have like a much longer conversation with someone in French, I'm already gonna start like shaking out like some of like my grammar, and I'm like, nope.
But it's more of like you can comprehend better, right?
Interestingly enough, because like I would say I wouldn't have a clear understanding of a lot of the vocabulary still. But one of the skills I definitely picked up on just learning a lot of languages was being able to decode and understand context. So which is what I use in Bisaya, because I'm like, I don't know what you're saying, but in context, I think I understand what we're talking about. Because like, for example, I don't know, when we are at a store buying for something, if they say something, I'm going to assume it's like, hey, can I help you with something? Are you looking for something? And I'll be like, yeah, I'm looking for something to do this. And and they'll understand like, oh, that means to write.
Okay.
So context clues, and eventually I'm able to like associate certain words with certain phrases or certain things. I'm like, the same way, the same way a child would like learn things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, eventually, you just pick up on it and you just learn and you survive.
Yeah. So now that you've been in the Philippines for
Yeah.
right around 10 years, right? Like, what are the major differences, or what changed in you compared to back then when, you just come here to visit, and then most of the time you're just hopping from country to country. And now that you're like, is it the right term to say you're settled in the
I mean, I'm
Philippines?
definitely settling myself in, that's
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, I guess, what has changed in me is definitely, I guess, the same thing that happens in any country, right? You kind of adjust, you kind of like learn to be. And that's kind of like a piece of advice I normally give people when they move to another country to live there. I would say, as much as possible, try not to resist the culture there, the way of life there, because the longer you do it, the harder it is for you to get used to the place. Instead, you're just gonna want to, as much as possible, really embrace it and be one with it. In Europe, the public transportation is very precise. If it says it's gonna arrive at a particular hour, it'll probably be there within like the minute or two. Here, you don't have that assurance. You're just kind of going with the flow. And I would say that's something that I ended up picking up in the Philippines. Just not everything has to be set in stone. Not everything has to be certain. And I think as far as that life lesson goes, right, we don't know what's going to happen later on in life. And I guess the lesson that I will be picking up in Manila that's kind of like adopted into how I live my life is just go with the flow, take it as it is. Maybe I was planning on taking angkas today or like a motor ride, but then it starts to rain. Oh well, I'm gonna have to take a book a car, or I'm gonna have to take a jeep, or maybe the bus is just really stuck in traffic. And you know what? Why don't I just get off the bus and walk the rest of the way there, and that'll be a lot faster. And it's learning to take it, just learning to take it as it goes, and like adjust, adapt, overcome, and don't let yourself be tied down to like every single minor inconvenience. And I'm pretty sure anyone who's been in Manila will agree the number of inconveniences you will run into on a regular basis.
Just in the airport.
Just in the airport, at least. But the thing is, like, that's the interesting thing that I found out about like Filipinos. They always say Filipinos always, a missed strategy. They're always like laughing. They're jolly about it. And on one hand, at first you kind of think that's so silly. Why would you be like laughing at a time like this? But at the same time, it was so precious to me. Like, again, like still as an outsider looking in, I was like, that's such a beautiful Filipino trait for you to be able to retain your joy, to retain your happiness, to retain a positive spin on things, even though they are quite literally neck deep in a flood. And you're like I think one of the best attributes I see in Filipinos is being able to make the best of a bad situation.
Yes.
And I'm like, that's such a great attitude, and I love it.
It's true.
Yeah.
You can see that on the local news. They're on the rooftop because it's flooding, and
Yeah.
they're just like,
Yeah, like they're like barbecuing up there, but like if it's done raining, they're like cooking, they're like having a camp out.
the flood's like knee deep, and they're still playing basketball, like tossing the balls around.
I mean, I had a really bad flood when I was in high school in Manila, and I remember everyone's response was, "Oh no, we're stranded," and everyone was like, "Oh guys, swimming pool."
That's exactly it. That's the mindset that I think, not just, I would say some Filipinos take that for granted, I guess, because
Yeah.
it's such a norm.
Yeah.
But for expats, that's what they love,
Yeah.
and that's why they're here.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. You say they take it for granted, right? And I'm like, that's such a similar pattern that you see no matter where I went. And it's a very common thing because I think a lot of times we take for granted something that we are so used to having. We're so used to having that sort of attitude in our country that we ignore its value and we focus on what our country is lacking. And like, some people would say it's people who are willing to stand up for certain things, be vocal about certain things. But then we go to any other country in the world, like for example, let's just say the US, for example. We get jealous of the US because they have a culture of promoting independence, right? Once the kid is 18 years old, they're on their own, they're out of the house. And here we're like, oh, that kind of sucks. I'm already 31 years old and I still have to ask my parents' permission to go on a date with my partner because I still live in their house technically. And I'm like, you're not on your own until you're married. But then again, the culture of independence in the U.S., great thing. Should we include it in our upbringing? Sure, at a point where you're still comfortable with it. But then you talk to some of the people in the U.S. and they're like, we really appreciate, or we feel really jealous about the Philippines, or even like Asian culture in general, where they have such a family-centered culture. Because for them, they have aging parents that are now very lonely because their children have their own life, which is, the life that they know they were supposed to have. They expected them to have a career, a family, their own kids to take care of. But then you have this older population that they're home, there's no one there, they're lonely. And they feel jealous on the Asian culture of things, it's like the Filipino culture, where if our Lola or Lolo like wants to see us, wants to be around, needs help, the entire family is just there, or like gathered to be there for like our grandparents or our parents. And here we complain about it, and there that's something they crave for.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of things we see in other countries that, they also, you can talk to a lot of people in Europe as well. Why do a lot of people travel outside of Europe? Because they want to see something that they're not accustomed to seeing, because Europe is Europe to them. To them, it is the norm. And they want to be able to experience or look for something that's not easily found where they are. So I think, overall, the lesson is there. It's good to keep in mind and strive for the things that we don't have, but don't let that diminish the value of the things that you already have around you.
Perfectly said.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris.
Yeah.
I truly appreciate it. That was beautifully said, honestly.
Oh man, yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for having me. I think we had conversations like this back in college even, and I'm like,
a lot of times.
I love having these sort of conversations with people.
And I'm so happy that you were actually willing to share it to them.
Yeah.
I'm sure they will truly appreciate your take in life, because again, you have such a unique story.
Yeah.
And I know we weren't able to cover up, in detail everything that has happened to you. But unfortunately, guys, we can't make this
An hour long.
a 20-hour-long video. But
yeah. I mean, who knows? Maybe I'll be back, or maybe you might show up in another channel with us.
yes, so
keep in tune for that, guys.
yeah, and guys, if ever, please leave your comments down below. We would love to hear your take on Chris's story here, and maybe you guys have something to share as well. Maybe someone listening here has a similar life story as well.
And I'm like, feel free to drop questions, comments. I'm pretty sure you'll let me know if there's anything, and I'll be more than happy to to answer some questions like again in the future. Well, right now I am kind of working with a podcast group. It's called like Talks with a TCK Friend, and where we have conversations exactly like this with other people that has a wide range of experiences, and we kind of just talk to them about what that experience was like for them and what did they learn from that. And if you guys are interested in more conversations like that, feel free to check us out, and we're hoping to have you on that show one of these days.
Perfect.
Once we can like set up a schedule for that.
Awesome. So I will just leave a link on the description box below.
Yeah.
The link that will lead them to Spotify.
Right now we're only on Spotify, but later on we might be branching out. Well, we're not only on Spotify, we're on whatever platform you listen normally for your podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, I'll be dropping down the link on the description box. So guys, thank you so much. And if you're new to this channel, please don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, notification bell, and don't forget to comment, because that's really what makes our day, right?
Exactly.
Hearing what you guys what's your take on this. And yeah, thank you again, Chris. Thank you so much for joining.
Joel, thank you so much,
Thank you.
man. Loved it.
And now it's time for us to take a dip, because the water is just calling us. We wanted to use this as our background, but unfortunately the light was just so bad. So yeah, guys, thank you again for tuning in, and we'll see you on our next video. Bye-bye.
Bye.